John had served his country for over 25 years, dedicating his life to the army. He never married, no time for a wife, giving all his time to his craft. But now, he was retired and had decided to return to his hometown in Maryland. He had hoped to find the familiar streets he once knew as a boy, but instead, he found a place that had been overrun by crime and drugs. Graffiti covered the walls, drug dealers stood on street corners, and people walked with a constant look of fear in their eyes. Robberies were common, trash littered the streets, and stores had bars on the windows. John couldn't stand to see his beloved hometown in such a state. He felt disgusted to his core, but John refused to be intimidated. He continued enjoying his retirement regardless of the issues around him. Then, one night, as John sat in a bar, his father would frequent many years before, sitting in a corner booth as to observe the room. He saw two young men come in and stand at the bar. They seemed like they were scouting the place, possibly looking for a victim. John questioned himself. Maybe he was having a hard time returning to normal society. Maybe he was seeing threats when there was none to be seen. He finished his whiskey, sat some money on the table, and got up to leave. As John left the bar, the two men followed him. He took notice immediately but waited for an opportunity to react. After about 2 blocks, when there was no one around, one of the men yelled out to John for him to stop. He knew this was his chance to react. He disappeared down an alley, with the two men now chasing after him. John had seemingly become a ghost, somehow turning into thin air. Then as the men searched for him, he came out of the shadows like a vengeful spirit, knocking the first man out cold. The second man pulling a revolver from his waistband, John immediately disarming him and using the weapon to break his nose, sending him to the ground. In this moment, John felt alive, a rush of adrenaline he hadn't experienced since he left the army. He told the conscious man to run, and he did with a fear he wasn't familiar with. John searched the first man, finding another handgun. Leaving the man on the ground, he continued on his way home. John notified the police. They took the two weapons, applauded him for her courage but told him next time just give them his money. He struggled to accept that, the police viewing his hometown as a lost cause, something to be left alone and not to waste time and effort on. John's military training kicked in, and he began to devise a plan. He spent weeks researching the gangs and drug dealers in the area, finding out where they were located and who their leaders were. He knew he couldn't take them all down alone, but he could start by taking out the key players. John became a vigilante, taking to the streets at night. He started with small actions, like stopping drug deals and intervening in violent incidents. But as he gained confidence, his actions became bolder. He amassed an arsenal of weapons and a small fortune from taking down his targets. But it felt for every man he put in the ground, or scared off, another one took his place the following week. He knew he had to move up the food chain. Soon, John was taking down entire gangs, breaking into their stash houses and disabling their operations. He worked in the shadows, never revealing his true identity, but his reputation spread throughout the city. People whispered about the old man who was taking back their streets. As the months passed, John's efforts began to pay off. The drug dealers and gangs started to leave the area, and the streets became safer. People walked with a little less fear, and the graffiti started to disappear. One day, John was approached by an older woman, and she put it all together, even impressing John. She knew he was the one doing all this and thanked him for making her neighborhood safe again and asked him why he was doing it. John looked at her and said, "I served in the army my entire life. When I retired and came back here, I couldn't just stand by and watch as my hometown was destroyed. I wanted to make a difference, and I knew I had the skills to do it. It's important to stand up for what you believe in, and I believe in a safe community." The woman nodded in understanding, and John knew that his efforts had not been in vain. She even offered to have him by for dinner one night. He smiled and politely declined. He had no time for such things anymore. He continued to patrol the streets at night, knowing that there would always be people who needed his help. John may have retired from the army, but he had found a new purpose in life. He had become the protector of his hometown, and he was proud of the difference he had made.